This movie was not received well upon its release, but later on it became a horror classic. Join me as we do a deep dive into the movie The Shining. Hey, how you doing? It is I, the Terrific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy, and welcome to Retro Horror School and a happy Friday to you. First off, let me give a big thank you and shout out to all of my Ko-fi and Twitch supporters: JWSJ, ScaredyCast, Phrase, The Flat Noodle, and Dr. Evil. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. And if you're interested in supporting my retro horror school endeavors on Ko-fi and Twitch, check out ko-fi.com/terrificlady or twitch.tv/terrificlady. Now, here we go. As I mentioned in my winter horror video, winter is scary because it is bleak and cold and deals with isolation. And what better movie, winter horror movie, to dive into than The Shining? And when I say dive, I mean we're going to dive deep. We are going to unpack everything from the very obvious to the subtle, from the very overtly supernatural to the psychological that's lurking deep beneath the surface, and even some theories you might not have heard before. But first, let's set the scene for The Shining. The Shining, released in 1980 and based on the novel of the same name by Stephen King, it stars Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, Shelley Duvall as Wendy Torrance, Danny Lloyd as Danny Torrance, and Scatman Crothers as Dick Halloran. Let's break this plot down act by act because every detail matters. Right from the start, we start seeing a few red flags. Jack drives up to the Overlook Hotel to interview for the winter caretaker position, claiming that the 5 months for isolation will be perfect for him because he could work on his new book and that his wife and his son will love it. But take note of the subtle tension whenever we meet Wendy and Danny. Wendy asks Danny if he wants to go to the hotel, and he doesn't seem all too excited about it.
Mom?
Yeah?
You really want to go and live in that hotel for the winter?
Sure I do. It'll be lots of fun.
Yeah, I guess so.
And then she asks his imaginary friend Tony if he would like to go to the hotel, and he's not really all too excited about it either. Later on, Danny talks to his friend Tony in the bathroom mirror, and his imaginary friend is warning him not to go, showing him some very grisly scenes in flashes, among them being the infamous elevator that is filled with blood. On closing day, they are driving up to the hotel, the Torrances. So the hotel is closing for the winter, and they are driving up to learn the ropes, and start their 5 month journey of isolation in the Colorado mountains. Note the Donner Party comment that Jack mentions.
They were a party of settlers in covered wagon times. They got snowbound one winter in the mountains. They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
You mean they ate each other up?
They had to, in order to survive.
It is a boatload of foreshadowing about cannibalistic survival instincts. Even though there is not cannibalism, there is still going to be some element of survival later on, and that comment foreshadows it. So when they get up to the hotel, Jack and Wendy are being shown around. Danny ends up in the games room, and that's where he gets his first sighting of the creepy twins. Along the way, Danny is collected by his parents, and he and his mom and the chef Dick Halloran end up in the kitchen. During all this, Danny learns that Dick also shares his gift, which Dick calls the Shining.
I can remember when I was a little boy, my grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining.
So Day learns that he is not the only one that has this ability. 1 month in, we kind of start to see the cracks a little bit. There's this daily routine going on. Wendy is trying to keep up the daily routine as much as possible by fixing all the meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just trying to keep up, pretty casual conversation. Jack in this movie is utterly obsessed with writing. You will find him asleep or in the room that he has designated his work area on his typewriter more often than not. But I also want to mention the use of title cards to mark time. It's like each title card with a day mentioned brings us one step closer to the chaos that is about to come. And the tension isn't built through just really out there in your face scenes. The tension is built through seemingly simple scenes. Danny riding past room 237, the room that he was warned previously by Dick to never go in. Jack's increasing hostility towards Wendy, the snowstorm that is about to hit and that is building up that will eventually isolate them and trap them, and those appearances of those twins, those creepy twins. Now, I want to go back to the room 237 sequence because this is important. Danny enters the room. Despite all warnings, he thinks his mom is in there, so he goes in, and something happens as the result of the supernatural, but it shows very real consequences on Danny. His neck is bruised, his sweater is torn. He is utterly traumatized. When Wendy finds Danny in this way, because Danny seeks out his mom and dad, and he is utterly traumatized, and he's not even speaking. So when Wendy finds him this way, she immediately is on Jack, calling him a son of a bitch for hurting him. And this implies abuse, which is confirmed later on in Jack's conversation with Lloyd, the ghostly bartender. We learned earlier that Jack had a drinking problem from Wendy, and it circles full force whenever he is talking to Lloyd, the ghostly bartender, about his problems, or his problems as he sees them. This is where everything just reaches a boiling point and explodes. The hotel has been working its evilness on Jack, and it reaches its peak whenever he attends a party in the ballroom, and he has seemingly walked into the 1920s. His conversation with Delbert Grady in that bathroom isn't just creepy, it's also revealing. When Grady tells him,
"I'm sorry to differ with you, sir, but you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker."
It's diving into cycles of time loops and violence that we will explore later. After this conversation, Jack destroys the snowcat, their only means of escape. He destroys the radio, their only means of communication since the phones are down. And he utterly terrorizes and terrifies his wife. She knocks him out, locks him in the pantry, and he's almost psychotic in his glee when he tells her that they cannot escape and she is not going anywhere. Danny has managed to get a hold of Dick through his shining powers, so Dick flies from Florida to Colorado to help. And Grady frees Jack from the locked pantry as Dick Halloran arrives in the snowcat. Danny and Wendy end up escaping, Danny through the window, And Wendy, once Jack is lured away by Halloran. Halloran dies. Damn it. Wendy encounters some weird kinds of visions in the hotel. And Danny leads his father into the maze very cleverly, where Jack freezes to death and becomes a part of the Overlook Hotel forever. Now we're going to dive into some of the themes behind The Shining and take a closer look. First, the sense of isolation and madness. The Overlook could be a symbol for Jack's deteriorating mental state as he sees ghosts. His sanity is breaking down until it eventually evolves into madness. And the isolation could have possibly contributed to that. Or he could have had it long before they came up to the Overlook. Who knows? Some people, when they look at this movie, they believe that the ghosts are not real at all. Because whenever he is having a conversation with a ghost, he's either facing a mirror or a highly polished door. Film reviewer James Berardinelli had this to say about the possibility of the ghosts not being real. It has been pointed out that there is a mirror in every scene where Jack sees a ghost, causing us to wonder whether the spirits are reflections of a tortured psyche. Now, the book The Shining clearly depicts these ghosts as supernatural entities, but Stanley Kubrick's version leaves things a little bit more ambiguous, which leaves the viewer questioning Jack's mental state, further blurring the line between reality and the supernatural. This brings into question the idea of the unreliable narrator. Is Jack really seeing ghosts, or are they just figments of his imagination? I kind of believe that he is seeing ghosts, that the hotel is tormenting him. These ghosts are manifestations of the hotel that he is actually seeing, and that they are telling him to do these horrible, awful, evil things. What do you think? Do you think these ghosts are real, or do you think that they're just figments of his imagination? There are ghosts in the hotel that are seen, but the ones that we see the most and that are given names are Delbert Grady. I know them as the little twin girls, and that's what we know them as, but I don't remember their names being given. So I'm kind of contradicting myself here. So twin girls, I don't remember their names. Lloyd the bartender. And that's it. The ghosts that are in the ballroom, whenever Jack goes to that 1920s party, you don't really know any of their names. So if you believe in the aspect of the unreliable narrator, Kubrick is telling a story with ghosts, but the ghosts may not even be present at all, except in the minds of Jack and, to a lesser degree, Wendy and Danny. Going back to James Berardinelli, he says, King would have us believe that the hotel is haunted. Kubrick is less definitive in the interpretations that he offers. He said this film was a failure as a ghost story, but a masterclass in the idea of the unreliable narrator. Then we got the supernatural idea of The Shining. The Shine basically is a telepathic ability that allows two people with the shine to connect with one another and have conversations, as Dick put it, without ever opening their mouths. And it also grants them a heightened awareness of everything around them. It's like a combination of both clairvoyance and telepathy. The hotel is a malevolent entity, and it particularly likes to feed off of and influence people with the shining. In this instance, it's kind of implied that maybe Jack has his own form of the shine, maybe to a lesser degree than Danny, but possibly. And this shine allows Danny to see the energies and the ghosts in the hotel, if you believe that he is seeing ghosts. And the power of the hotel allows Danny's already strong shine to just be exploded tenfold. Now, a really freaky theme that is going on in this movie is time and cycles, and the idea of time loops and potential reincarnation. At the end of the movie, you have the camera slowly moving in towards the wall of the Overlook Hotel. This wall is covered with pictures, but the camera focuses on one particular picture. It is an image of a July 4th ball in 1921 at the Overlook Hotel. And it keeps moving closer in. And we see that one of the characters in that picture resembles Jack Torrance. Kubrick, in an interview, suggested that Jack is a reincarnation of a person who previously worked at the hotel. And some interpret that as Jack, for some reason, being absorbed into the hotel. Film critic Jonathan Romney, he is more along the line of the absorption theory. As the ghostly butler Grady tells him during their chilling confrontation in the men's toilet, "You're the caretaker, sir. You've always been the caretaker." Perhaps in some earlier incarnation, Jack really was around in 1921, and it's his present day self that is the shadow, the phantom photographic copy. But if his picture had been there all along, why has no one noticed it? After all, it's right at the center of the central picture on the wall, and the Torrances have had a painfully drawn out winter of mind numbing leisure in which to inspect every corner of the place. Is it just that, like Poe's purloined letter? The thing in plain sight is the last thing you see. When you do see it, the effect is so unsettling because you realize the unthinkable was there under your nose, overlooked the whole time. I tend to believe, and go with the absorption theory myself, I tend to believe that Jack was absorbed in the hotel, but the idea that he was reincarnated and had always been the caretaker is an intriguing one. I always took the picture as evidence or as a way to show that the hotel has collected yet another victim. Now, let's break down the main characters in The Shining. And I want to say that Kubrick is awesome and brilliant in the way that he shows these characters because they're not shown through long bits of exposition. He shows us through their actions and through the way they speak. Now, let's start with Jack. Jack isn't just a victim of the hotel. He is a malignant narcissist, which happens to be the worst kind of narcissist that you could possibly be. A malignant narcissist is the most toxic and aversive type of narcissist. These individuals are quite charming, yet political, manipulative, and often lack remorse. Due to their exploitative nature, they could truly cause a lot of devastation and damage to others. These are individuals who may not only bend or break the rules, but also abuse their power. These individuals often see others as disposable and the means to an end. Notice how everything is very I in his dialogue. It's very focused on him.
And are you concerned about me?
Of course I am.
Of course you are. Ever thought about my responsibilities?
Oh, Dick, what are you talking about?
Have you ever had a single moment's thought about my responsibilities?
And even though he says that he loves their son, he says it that there's not really much showing from him that he actually does. A little bit of a further exploration into Jack, the things that have shaped him as a person. He's an alcoholic who's been on the wagon for 5 months. We know he has previously abused and injured Danny severely. You could tell from the way Wendy and Jack act around each other, they're having marriage problems, and it could have possibly stemmed from the alcoholism and the fact that he abused Danny. Also, a little side note, the reason that he was looking for this caretaker job, he mentioned that he was a teacher. So was a teacher implies that he is not anymore. And due to his past, the movie implies that he lost his job. Now, in the book, it's more definite about it. He definitely lost his job in the book. The movie implies it. But yeah, also lost his job, which the financial stress could have also contributed to the tension and the marriage problems. The hotels don't create Jack's demons, they just amplify them. Now, I want you to think about this. Grady, the caretaker, went on his little psycho killing spree in 1970 when he killed his wife and children. The Shining, I'm going to assume, is set in 1980. Think about this. There had to be caretakers in between 1970 and 1980. And to the best of our knowledge, they have not gone mad. They haven't gone mad to the degree of Grady or Jack. Jack was already vulnerable because of his demon of alcoholism, but the hotel greatly played up on his narcissism. Now let's talk about the character of Wendy and how she is portrayed by Shelley Duvall. Yes, she won a Razzie for her performance, but that completely misses the point. Wendy is a portrayal of a domestic abuse survivor. Notice how she makes excuses for his behavior.
My husband had been drinking, and he came home about 3 hours late, so he wasn't exactly in the greatest mood that night. And, well, Danny had scattered some of his school papers all over the room, and my husband grabbed his arm, to pull him away from him. It's just the sort of thing you do 100 times with a child, in the park or in the streets. But on this particular occasion, my husband just used too much strength, and he injured Danny's arm.
Tends to walk on eggshells to avoid any kind of conflict, but then also shows incredible strength whenever she is pushed to the limit and becomes resourceful in protecting Danny. She's pushed to the limit whenever Jack is coming after her on the stairs and she doesn't know what's happening. This is a man that she's been married to for, I think, 10 years, if I remember correctly. So she's been married to him for quite a while. She has no idea what has driven him so mad. And you think you know somebody in some aspect, but she was proven wrong. She showed strength and resilience by knocking him out and then having to drag him all the way from there to the pantry. And then her resourcefulness and locking her and Danny in the bathroom and getting Danny out through the window. And remember what the ghost of Grady said to Jack: your wife is stronger than we realize. She may not be strong in terms of physical strength, but she is strong in terms of willpower and resourcefulness. Wendy kicks ass. Now let's talk about Danny, and he is not the typical horror movie child. He's dealing with these extraordinary powers in an impossible situation. His shine allows him to see and peel away the hotel's dark history. It allows him to communicate and connect telepathically with Dick Halloran and sense impending danger. Think about it. This kid sees visions that would probably have most adults pissing themselves. And he's watching his father unravel and not really understanding what's going on and having to both outsmart his father and the hotel for him to survive. That May scene where he is running and then realizes his dad's going to be able to catch up to him as long as he's leaving footprints. So he walks backwards in his own footprints and hides. That is pure genius. Now I'm going to go over the Overlook Hotel, and you may be saying, hey, this isn't a character, this is a setting. But I hold the belief that settings can be characters, and the Overlook is the most prominent character in this film. Dick mentions that places where bad things happen hold evil and traces of what happened. So bad dark energy. But here's the funny thing. All these evil things were overlooked because it was a hotel that was making money. So even though, for instance, that horrible, awful thing had happened in 1970, I'm sure it wasn't widely reported on. It was covered up, and they still had people coming and staying at the hotel. I would feel really weird about staying in a hotel where someone was murdered, but that's just me. Let's talk about how Kubrick crafted this masterpiece. Here's where it gets a little mind-bending. The Overlook's layout is intentionally built to be as confusing as possible and intentionally impossible. The executive producer Jan Harlan confirmed this. Let me show you a few things. Windows appear in Stuart Ullman's office, which is surrounded by interior hallways, so how could he have windows in his office? Then you have that massive ballroom, which physically could not fit inside the Overlook Hotel. Then you have doorways that lead to impossible places and spaces, and also rooms that appear to be in one place in one scene and then another place in another. Then you have furniture and wall fixtures that are even moving between scenes. And Harlan said this is well spotted because Harlan called it a ghost story and a story about the supernatural, so of course this is not supposed to make any sense. Kubrick's use of sound in this movie is brilliant, and it is also very intentional. For instance, the ominous opening music whenever Jack is driving up to the hotel sets the stage for what is to come. And strategic silence during tense moments, like right after Wendy enters the room where Jack is typing, there's just silence that really amplifies those tense moments.
Hi, hon. How's it going?
Fine.
Also, there's not necessarily music, but think about the way the sound amplifies during Danny's rides on his big wheel. It just reminds us of just how big this place really is. And then the contrast between the silence of the hotel and the chaos of the ballroom scenes.
Good evening, Mr. Torrance.
Good evening.
What is one of your favorite uses of sound in the movie? Now we're going to take a deeper dive into the symbolism behind The Shining. Room 237. So room 237 isn't just a haunted room. It is a symbol of temptation and trauma. The whole our curiosity gets us into trouble kind of thing. And also, on the flip side of that, he's warned to stay out, but he enters anyway, reflecting larger themes of forbidden knowledge, knowledge that is cut from us, and inevitable confrontation with evil in whatever form evil takes. The Indigenous connection. Bill Blakemore's 1987 essay, Kubrick's Shining Secret, Film's Hidden Horror, is the murder of the Indian, revealed something most viewers miss. The Overlook is built on Indigenous burial ground, but this is just the surface. Look deeper and you'll notice the Calumet baking powder cans with Indian logos, Indigenous artwork throughout the hotel. Halloran dies on a rug with an Indigenous motif. The blood from the elevator representing the blood of the many Indigenous that were killed. And that July 4th, 1921 photo, which is particularly ironic given what Independence Day tends to mean for Indigenous, because for years they were not even allowed to celebrate their own culture. So they use July 4th as a way to honor and celebrate their culture and to remember what they lost. There's also the moon landing theory. This is an interesting one. Some theorists believe that The Shining contains Kubrick's confession of the fact that he faked the moon landing, or he says that he did. They point to Danny's Apollo 11 sweater that he's wearing. Room 237, which the moon's mean distance from the Earth is 237,000 miles. The carpet pattern resembling the Apollo's launching pad, and Jack's rant about contracts and employer loyalty. The differences between King's book and Kubrick's film are interesting because it entirely changes how things are interpreted. So in King's version, Jack fights back against the hotel's influence. The hotel is overtly the clear villain. There's no ambiguity there. The supernatural elements are more definitive. They are actually seeing ghosts. Jack sacrifices himself to save his family. The ending offers a bit of redemption or redemption arc in a way. In Kubrick's version, it is clear that Jack is inherently unstable. The hotel amplifies already existing darkness in a person. The supernatural elements are ambiguous and left up to the viewer's interpretation. Jack dies alone in the snow. Wendy becomes stronger through trauma. And the ending is definitely ambiguous, again, left up to interpretation. Stephen King was not particularly a fan of Kubrick's adaptation because The Shining, while he was writing it, it was a deeply personal book for him. He wrote it while battling alcoholism, supporting two kids while living in poverty, and dealing with his own destructive influences. Jack Torrance was King's way of exploring what he could have become. When Kubrick made Jack more overtly villainous, King felt it betrayed the themes in his book of redemption and family. And I looked up even recent things, and it seems like King's stance has not changed. He still doesn't particularly like it. Now, I don't know if his mind has changed since then, but the last thing I looked up pretty recently, he still held the same sentiments. What are your thoughts on the book, and do you prefer it more to the movie? Well, The Shining's influence on horror and its legacy cannot be overstated. It was added to the National Film Registry in 2018 for films that were culturally and historically significant. It revolutionized the use of Steadicam in filmmaking. It created a new language for psychological horror, and it spawned countless parodies. Remember, one of the most prominent, one of the ones I'm the most aware of is the parody of The Shining in The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. And as we previously discussed, it generated endless theories and analyses, including this one. And it even brought forth a documentary, Room 237. Room 237, as I previously mentioned, it came out in 2012, and it shows just how deep the rabbit hole goes, with theories ranging from Holocaust allegories, fairy tale deconstructions, commentary on American imperialism, and hidden messages about sexuality and power. Now, I had a bit of a complex relationship with this film over the years. I wavered between it being very overrated and very underrated. I never knew really quite what to feel about it for a long time, but ultimately, what I see it as, it's definitely a psychological horror, and it's got that sprinkling of the supernatural in it. The ghosts and the hotel enhance what is inherently a story about family trauma and cycles of violence, and about the truth finally coming to light. I want to hear from you. What are your favorite theories about The Shining? What is your favorite scene in The Shining? What do you think in general about The Shining? Just anything you want to tell me about The Shining, let me know in the comments below. Please like and share this with fellow horror fans because it really does help. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss another Retro Horror School class. And class is dismissed, sadly, everybody, for now, but I will see you next time. Bye!